They are a very good team, and they are hidden underneath the radar. Belmont almost took it away from the Terrapins. What are your thoughts about the Belmont-Maryland game?
Well, actually, it's the first time, believe it or not, in the history of the first four era that a team advancing out of the first four has not won a first-round game. That's the first time that's happened, believe it or not. Belmont had their chance to win this ball game, and I think you look at that matchup next for Maryland against LSU, another team that looked vulnerable against Yale. Again, the bottom half of this draw just looks weak, in my opinion. I mean, Maryland and LSU, I don't think are teams that are capable of playing with a Duke. And based on what we saw against Bradley, I think Michigan State certainly is too hot and cold to do it. And I think, granted, they'll struggle against Minnesota. They'll win that game. But even if they get to Washington, D.C., have a chance to beat Duke, I just don't think this is the team, at least based on the performances I've seen recently, that could hold a candle to Duke. And I think if you're looking at a Final Four right now, if Duke's not included in it, you're a little bit cuckoo crazy in my opinion, because this right now I think is the team to beat in this tournament. And granted, of course, I said that about Virginia last year. It didn't work out that way, but I think the path is a lot fresher for Duke, even if their team is not necessarily at 100%.
Let's talk a little bit about LSU and Yale. That was where I was kind of looking for an upset. Didn't know. Sometimes you just got to roll the dice. I did pick Yale in this particular bracket that I'm referring to for the show purposes, but I split the ticket because I had LSU and other brackets. But Yale, LSU, what are your thoughts?
You do. LSU is going to be questionable considering Will Wade is still not with the team, the head coach, because of the FBI investigation, possible NCAA sanctions involving that. The team's got talent. It's just, can they put it all together? And I just don't think they could do it today when it comes down to Maryland. Now, granted, I don't think Maryland is the strongest team at the bottom half of that draw, granted, necessarily, but I think in this scenario, Maryland finds a way to win, and I think MSU does likewise against the Minnesota team that, had a great, strong run, but certainly I think took advantage of a very mistake-prone Louisville team to get to where they are in the tournament at this point. I think it was more Louisville playing poorly as opposed to Minnesota winning that contest, even though Minnesota did put up 88 points in that victory on Thursday.
Louisville, Minnesota. Minnesota obviously coached by Coach Pitino's son, pedigree when it comes to coaching goes. But Minnesota Golden Gophers have earned the right where they're at. And I tell you what, I was kind of thought, man, what a slap in the face to match up Minnesota and Louisville. But it is what it is. But at the same time, I that was where I went wrong at, and I've got red all the way up to the Elite Eight with Louisville. I picked them to take a ride. So we got Minnesota. Minnesota now takes on Michigan State. Man, Bradley gave Michigan State all their worth. And we know Michigan State. We've watched them long enough to know that Tom Izzo is going to make the adjustments that he needs to make. But we've got a matchup today of two great coaches, Coach Pitino and Coach Tom Izzo, both Big Ten matchups. This is huge. Talk with us about the game, Michigan State and Minnesota.
I think right now it's going to be a no contest. Michigan State, I think, will get the message right now. In fact, you have players on the ESPN.com that are defending their coach for his outbursts during that performance against Bradley. I think they'll get the message. I think you'll see a much more focused performance today for Michigan State than you did against Bradley. I just don't think Minnesota really has much of a chance to get the job done in this matchup. That's not to say Minnesota's a bad team, but I just don't think they match up well against a Michigan State team that's going to be out to prove something and prove they are still in the NCAA tournament with the remaining rounds.
Let's talk a little bit about that action that you're referring to, and you certainly hear a lot more local activity around that. We make jokes, hey, he pulled a Bobby Knight. But at the same time, he was clearly honked off at the freshman. I believe it was a traveling call. But either which way, it was a very close game. Could have cost them the game. Could have cost them the tournament. He had every right to be upset. But I think kind of the way that he went about it may have been. We're in 2019. It's like the don't get in my face mode. What are your thoughts about how Tom Izzo handled that situation with the freshman? I'm sorry, his name escapes me, but it's certainly been getting a lot of national attention and a lot of national buzz about old school coaches and about old school coaching styles.
Well, he didn't shove him or didn't push him. As long as it didn't get to that point where he got physically altercated, like Bob Knight did with Theo Reed, therefore I'm not in the necessary of that being too bad a thing. Granted, that's what Brian Kelly does at Notre Dame sideline sometimes. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. Now, if he got physical with him, then I would have said, yeah, I would have had a problem with it. But I didn't see any issues there. It's just a frustrated coach saying, hey, we don't want to be negative history because you lose a game like that where you're a 2 seed, you lose to a 15, which has only happened, I think, like 7 or 8 times. That lives with you for the rest of life, and you are remembered for that. So I think more out of sympathy of them doing that, but it didn't get physical, so therefore I don't have as big a problem with it as some people did.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm sure he's learned his lesson, and he knows. Hey, don't get on Tom Izzo's bad side. Let's get on down to the next bracket. Gonzaga Bulldogs. We've talked about them. I've got them picked to go into the Final Four in this particular bracket that we're making references to. I know a lot of people have been watching the brackets and studying the brackets. People in our group. A lot of people have Gonzaga going for the ride. They had no problem in the first round. Gonzaga Bulldogs. We have. They're no stranger to us in the month of March, but the Bulldogs are now going to be facing Baylor. And, wow, that was a touch and go there with Syracuse. You never really know when you got those 8 and 9 seed matchups. So talk with us a little bit about Gonzaga and, well, now Baylor, the Baylor Bears.
I think Gonzaga right now wins this game. Syracuse, I think, was the better team in that matchup against Baylor, and they just didn't show it on Thursday. You look at the scenarios right now for Gonzaga, I think the big concern for them when they head to Anaheim next week is trying to win that Sweet 16 game because you have a Murray State team in John Morant who looks very, very potent, or the first triple-double. And you also have a Florida State team that also can fill up the basket. So even though they had their problems with Vermont, I expect a big bounce back from them. That should be a very interesting evening matchup in Hartford later this evening between two teams. I think that certainly are more than capable of knocking Gonzaga out of the tournament next week at Anaheim.
Let's talk about this huge game. Murray totally schooled Marquette, no pun intended. A lot of people don't even know what the heck is a Murray State racer. They're in the state of Kentucky. I know that because I grew up down in God's country down there. So that's kind of my area of the world. But Murray State racers, we remember them from a few years ago. They did well in the tournament. Those of us that follow basketball know who Murray State is, but my God, they showed up. Marquette did not show up. Marquette, number 5 team, number 5 seed, which, by the way, just totally irks my you know what to see Marquette in there. IU beats them early on in the season. IU number 1 seed in the NIT. Sorry, I digress, but we should have been there. That was a we should have been there moment. But Marquette and Murray State just totally dominates Marquette. What are your thoughts?
I don't think Marquette was overseeded. I think actually they were underseeded. Just had a bad run late. I think that knocked them to the 5 line. Murray State is just like when they had Isaiah Cannon. They have one player in there in John Morant that is very impressive, very exciting to watch, and very effective. And I'll be very curious to see what Florida State, Leonard Hamilton do to keep them in check. We need to pick up the pace here a little bit since we only got 7 minutes till the bottom of the hour. So let's get through some of these other ones here.
Go ahead,
Texas Tech, Buffalo tomorrow. You look at that matchup. I think Buffalo took advantage of a very average Arizona State team yesterday in Tulsa, so I still think we haven't seen a real test from them. Texas Tech, I think, is the better team in that matchup. They'll find a way to get there. That's why I have Texas Tech going all the way to Minneapolis in the Final Four. Florida's a great story. They have a lot of momentum right now. I think they will give Michigan a scare today. I just don't know if it's going to be enough for them to get through that matchup. I have Michigan winning that. And then you look at the South draw, that, like I said, that Virginia-Oklahoma game, Virginia is vulnerable. I think that's going to be a very vulnerable game for them. And even if they get to Louisville, I still think they're going to have a problem with either Oregon or a UC Irvine team that still, I think, is under the radar for most people. And then the big question in my mind is, could Villanova or Purdue find a way past someone other than Carson Edwards has to step forward? We saw, glimmer of that for Grady Eifert, but you can't expect necessarily Grady Eifert to be the guy. Be very curious to see what factor Dojel Eastern has, since he supposedly will be available for this game for Matt Painter. But I think that's a game where Purdue's run unfortunately comes to an end at the hands of Villanova today. And then the other matchup, big opportunity lost for Cincinnati yesterday. They should have won that game against Iowa. It gives a much easier opponent for a Tennessee team that, granted, looked a little bit sluggish themselves against Colgate. But I think in Columbus tomorrow, Tennessee finds a way to win that. And then the remaining games, like I said, UNC all Savaro against the Washington team. I think the Pac-12 is not getting the respect they deserve. Washington beat a very strong Utah State team yesterday handily. And then I think the winner of that game certainly has a chance to get to the Elite Eight, because I don't think I've seen anything positive from, granted, either Auburn or Kansas in that draw for that matchup later tonight. I don't think there's a strong team between Auburn and Kansas between those two. And then you look at the bottom half, Ohio State, Houston, teams I still have question marks on. And I think the match I think a lot of people are looking forward to, seeing what this Francis McGee and Wofford could do if they can find a way past Kentucky. If Wofford finds a way past Kentucky, I think it is going to be wide open. You could see a very unexpected Final Four candidate for the Midwest region.
If that happens, that's going to be a bracket buster. Not really for me. Well, I kind of had them going to the Elite Eight, Kentucky. But if Wofford, I mean, we saw what they did against Seton Hall. That was probably one of the biggest upsets of the weekend of the week so far.
The thing is,
you're
Tom,
absolutely
though,
right.
This
They
matchup
can't.
today, Wofford cannot have a scoreless drought of 8 minutes like they had against Seton Hall, because they had that game in control and they let Seton Hall back in. Granted, they regained control of it, but they cannot afford to do that against Kentucky. If they do that against Kentucky today, they will get buried.
We'll talk real quickly while we still got a couple more minutes about our own perspective, Final Four and championship. Just, again, referring back to the bracket that I'm referring to, because it happens to be number one in the balance group, so it happens to be dominated and superior right now, so this is what we're making for the reference. But I've got Virginia Tech, Gonzaga, and then Virginia and Auburn, and in the championship, I got Gonzaga and Virginia winning. What are your thoughts?
Went a little more conservative on my route. Went with Duke winning in the East. I just think they have a little bit too much, even with Zion Williamson not at 100%. They can find a way past Taco Fall and UCF on Sunday. I like their chances to get the rest of the way, because the rest of the group in there just looks iffy at best. And granted, Texas Tech under the radar, but I think they're the team to be in the West right now. I think they'll find a way to get by Michigan or Gonzaga or both if they have to. In the South, Tennessee did look poor against Colgate, but I think considering who is left in the draw, if they can find a way past Villanova, I think they can certainly find a way past the Pac defense at Virginia if that's who they have to deal with in the regional final in Louisville. And then looking in the Midwest, I got to go with Kentucky. Wofford, I think, is a tough team in their way, but if they can find a way past Wofford, considering how sluggish UNC looked and considering not too much with Auburn, Kansas, or Ohio State and Houston at this point, I think it could be a free ride for Kentucky. And then for the championship game, I think Duke finds a way to get past Kentucky in the championship game in Minneapolis on April the 8th.
We're talking with Matthew Embry, WSBT up in South Bend. So March Madness action, what's going on? A lot of action going on today. We're going to be getting back into that toward the end of the show with Mo from the BS Sports Show. But we're going to branch off into some racing here. Just remember, we're going to take a break here in a moment. We'll get into some racing. Indy Car in Austin at the Formula One race. As we remember when Formula One was here in Indianapolis. Certainly Formula One coming to the United States is always fun to watch, but this is the first time that Indy Car has been out at the Circuit of Americas. My name is Marquis, Presidente. We'll be right back. Tyson Luntzeiger also will be joining us, and we're going to get into some Indy Car talk right here on the Balance Radio Network.